Thank you, Ed Leva. We want to move on now to a discussion, and to start us off, I asked the Imam to maybe share some words, because we know that you're working with these communities already. And please be thinking of action steps that you as an individual or as organizations can take in order to improve the plight of Syrian refugees. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Peace be with you all. Again, my name is Taha Hassan, and I'm the Imam and Director of the Islamic Center of San Diego, which is the largest mosque in San Diego County. For your information, in San Diego County there is, I think, 22 or 23 mosques, and the Muslim population is estimated to be some like between 80 to 100,000 Muslims. Very ethnically diverse, from all over the world, most of them immigrants. I'm myself an immigrant from Algeria. So let me look around to say something. Okay, now I'm a little bit disappointed because I have invited some representatives of the Syrian community. I have sent them an email and urged them to attend, but none of them showed up. Okay, which means I have a lot of work to do with them. And I would like to thank the Leichtag Foundation. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to be here together and to talk about this very important issue now. I don't think we are here to solve the Syrian problem, but we are here basically to talk about it, to start the conversation. And I like the diversity that is here. People, different organizations, and we have been working with our interfaith partners, a lot of civil rights and advocacy organizations here, and I believe that there are two things, or two ways, or two parts. The first one is political, as our speaker said, to engage our politicians, to lobby them, to talk to them, to pressure them, and we did something like this last week with a big coalition at the Islamic Center of San Diego, and we brought Congressman Scott Peters, and we asked him, why did you vote on that shameful bill? You know what was his answer? Fear. We are scared. Come on, I was expecting you to give us like some numbers, database, facts, so nothing. Anyway, the Syrian refugees, the same as the Iraqi refugees, the Somalian refugees before them, when they are resettled here by agencies like IRC, Catholic Charities, and so on, the first door that they knock on is the Islamic Center of San Diego. This is where they feel more comfortable. They would like to talk to the imam. They would like to share some thoughts, some frustration, some, being strangers here, etc. Even if they go to other mosques in Al Cajon City, in City High, in La Mesa, they will send them to us because they think that we are the biggest one, the richest mosque. We don't receive any government grants, but we are doing all what we can to help these refugees. Many of them come to us asking for financial help. They can't pay their rent. They cannot pay some of the bills. They cannot provide some necessities for their household, so they come to us. And the money that we help them with is the charity of our community members. Whatever we receive, we give it back to them. So I really would like to see this momentum growing and this initiative being more solid so we can have a follow-up. This meeting is great, but if there will be no follow-up, it means that we're not going to achieve anything. So I would like to see some follow-up so we can come together as a small group and talk about what are we going to do exactly, some practical steps. So when the refugees come here, we will take care of them. We as the Muslim community are ready to contribute with whatever we can. And I will do my best to engage my community, especially the Syrian refugee. The Syrian community in San Diego is very well financially established. Every single dentist I can think about in my community is Syrian. Every single medical doctor I can think about in my community is Syria. So we have a big potential, a lot of talents, but we need to engage them. So maybe this is my job with other leaders of my Muslim community like Ramla, but we are ready to do this work if you can come and help us so we can work all together. At the end, a coalition of faith-based and civil rights organizations is organizing this event. It's a rally this coming Thursday, the 10th, between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. in front of the county building. It's called Human Rights Day Community Action for Refugees. So faith leaders, by the way, I'm very involved in the interfaith work. I'm board member with the ICWJ Interfaith Center for Worker Justice of San Diego County, a member with the East Coast, the West Coast Muslim Catholic Dialogue, and many other organizations. So faith leaders, ACLU, many other organizations are coming together and inviting as many people as possible in order to show this support to the refugees, to the Syrian refugees. So please make your time, try to attend, show up at the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was very well said, because we also think that this was a great event. We're very happy that you're all here, but if there's no follow-up, we really will have failed in our mission. So I heard the Imam saying, draw a smaller group together to talk about some practical action steps. I've heard, Georgette gave us some recommendations. We're gonna take notes, and we'd love to hear your ideas and ideas that you have as individuals and as organizations to follow up. I think I'll just ask people to talk loud that are in the audience, and I'll start with you in the back.
Hi everyone, my name is Ramla. I'm with Hannah Partnership for the Advancement of Americans. I'm a Somali woman refugee woman from Somalia. What we really acknowledged and identified in refugee communities is there's really good support. The initial 8 months of resettlement and refugee resettlement agencies will attest to that. But after that 8 months, right, and our Refugee Act actually specifically says that the priority of the refugee resettlement program is immediate job employment. What that means is for refugees, they don't have time to learn English as well as they could, or get into trade programs or certificate programs that enter them into middle class, high paying or work that pays the family sustaining income, right? So we're trapping refugees in generational poverty, right? We're sort of saying, okay, well, you're stuck in poverty, and my generation, right, the kids that are growing up in this country, have an opportunity to go to college and maybe lift up the entire family. That's a bad policy to have. And I think our resettlement agencies are incredibly under-resourced. They could talk about that. And the missing link is opportunities to do advocacy, opportunities to really work with not only our federal government, but our county leaders. The fact that we couldn't have one county leader stand up and say, I'm gonna speak for refugees on this day of action, on this Human Rights Day of action, is incredibly sad. And so one of the things I would recommend is resourcing and supporting advocacy efforts that build unity and build inclusive societies in ways that are sustainable for refugees.
Other ideas?
As Imam said, Scott Peters voted for the House bill, and should the Senate vote in a similar fashion and it goes to the President for a veto, it's going to be incredibly important that Representative Peters changes his vote. So for all those who have influence in North County, who are have his ear,
I'm not influential.
or know somebody who has his ear or whatever, etc., to convince him to change his mind and to have his colleagues change their mind so that the President's veto would stand. And then if that happens, then all this bad rhetoric in terms of curtailing the refugee program, that would fail. Not the fear, not all the other things that are going on, but at least from a political standpoint, we do have an opportunity locally to change one congressman's mind, who I think is open to changing that if he hears more people other than the resettlement agencies and the refugee groups. If he hears from his constituents, he'll listen.
Thank you.
That will essentially allow, if that veto is able to be sustained, that'll allow us to see about 10,000 based upon the State Department's most recent figures. 10,000 refugees come in within approximately a 2-year period. Is that right?
It would be 10,000 for this year, and then it's proposed to go up to 100,000. So then it would be another 15,000, right? So there'd be 25,000 over the course of the 2 years.
So that could be extremely meaningful here. And what would your projection of the local effect?
I knew you were going to ask that question. All right, San Diego County has historically and consistently resettled about 4% of the national total. That does not include the period of time. And I would say, and in all deference and respect for the fact that the focus is on Syria, but the legislation is Syrian and Iraqi.
Mm-hmm.
San Diego County has the largest Iraqi population of resettlement, even more than Michigan, because Michigan said no more refugees. So San Diego County, 53% of the refugees that were resettled in San Diego County last year were from Iraq, 85% the year before. So the biggest impact will be with the Iraqi population, not the Syrians, but 4%. So 4% of 10,000 is 400. And 400 between 4 agencies is 100 people per agency. And there's 50 weeks in a year, that's 2 refugees per week. We have the capacity, we have the ability to do that. So when people say there's all these refugees coming, they think 10,000 are coming to San Diego County. No, 400 probably at best. And in all deference, every refugee group, every immigrant group will always say we have 10,000, 20,000. We've been doing it for 35 years, and the first person who arrives says there's 10,000 people already here. The reality is, from the census material, about 1,900 to 2,000. Even the Syrian leadership on KPBS TV a year ago said we have 2,000 Syrians. Then the Syrian crisis got in the newspaper, and then it was 20,000. Guarantee you there were not 18,000 more that came in during the period of time. So one of the things we have to be careful about is overstating the numbers, which feeds the fear that all of a sudden we're going to have all these people. And the reality is, just as Imam said, the Syrians that are here are very well off, very well educated. Most do live in North County, and they too can be a resource, but let's not create some ammunition for those who oppose this to think that all of a sudden we're going to get all these people.
Christy?
So that's a really good point, I think. And also it seems if we're going to have a local plan to support those refugees who come to the United States, we should incorporate a plan to help the refugees who aren't lucky enough to get here, who are in Syria and Jordan in these resettlement camps. It seems like in the one city that Georgette referenced, there's a pretty vibrant economy. There are 84,000 people or something like that. How can we support those people to some degree who probably won't come to the United States or other countries in the world, and help them establish new communities that are much closer to their homeland and not whatever 5,000 or 6,000 miles away, where they have fewer family members, fewer support systems, even though San Diego is going to be the poster child. I think we have to incorporate a plan also to help those who are not lucky enough to come to the United States or other Western civilizations.
On that point, I was just going to say we're really lucky to have the local director of the International Rescue Committee. David's here, and maybe you can address that because the IRC has come up so much today and is doing so much of this work.
Sorry
so
it came up
we want
so
them.
much.
No, we're very. we're admiring the
So
good work.
I'm David Murphy. I'm the executive director of IRC, but for the last 18 years I've worked with IRC overseas. And so, kind of starting at a global level, what can be done? I mean, a question was raised. You know, the world's a crazy place and continues to get crazier. There are 60 million people displaced in the world today. That is more than at any other time since World War II. The UN agency, UNHCR, UN High Commission for Refugees, was set up post-World War II as just a temporary UN agency meant to work just post-World War II, and then they were to close down. Now they're a multi-billion-dollar UN agency working all around the world. You saw on the hotspot map, she showed very quickly where all the hotspots are around the world. The world is continuing to generate displaced. And part of the question, I would say, is the world is lacking political leadership at a global level to hold presidents, prime ministers, dictators accountable for what they're doing to their people. And that so oftentimes throughout the world, these leaders are able to act with impunity. They're not held accountable. And so until that changes, I'm afraid that the displacement will continue. As you've heard about with this House bill last week that passed, it'll now go to the Senate. There are quite a number of versions of a refugee bill, both that didn't make it to the House floor. It was just this one that made it. It was specifically talked about Syria and Iraq. But there were other bills talking about all refugees and even expanding into migrants and immigration. And as you know, that's a very contentious topic here. So just because this one was only Syria and Iraq, that's actually a good thing. It could have been even worse. So now it's sitting with the Senate, and they have not put a bill forward. There are a number of bills that are being passed around. As far as what the Senate is going to put forward, they may attach it to the budget, which Congress has to pass their budget by December 11th, or there's no money. And so if you have not contacted your congressional delegates, your leaders, please do so. Now is the time to do it. In talking with Scott Peters and others, they're hearing from the negative. They're hearing people with the loud voices that are anti-immigration, anti-refugees. They're the ones that are speaking loud right now. Meanwhile, everyone else is just being quiet. And so really I would encourage you to reach out. Also governors. We are lucky that we live in a state where Governor Brown is welcoming of refugees, but there's 31 governors across the country that are not welcoming. The state of Texas actually has tried to stop IRC from bringing in a Syrian family and has sued us with a temporary restraining order and an injunction to stop bringing a Syrian family to Texas on Friday. I mean, so this thing is still escalating. So then coming into what can be done at a city council meeting. There is a Welcoming America, Welcoming Communities initiative, where mayors of cities, large and small, can sign off on being a welcoming community. And this is something, just Google it and it'll pull up a lot of information. It was a White House initiative, but it's really taking off. And there's a lot of communities that are very pro refugees. And so now is the time for that voice to be heard. And then finally, what can be done? Especially overseas, there is a huge lack of funding. There's more displaced today than ever before. But the amount of money going to help refugees, humanitarian aid, that pot of money is not growing. And so there's a constant game, rob Peter to pay Paul, and so especially with the Syrian refugees, 4 million people displaced around Syria, there's not much money coming in. And so find organizations that you support, and support by money. I know you like to do in kind and donate, but the quickest way to be able to support organizations is through money, and then they can do the programming themselves. If, for example, you do a clothing drive, by the time you get it and then try to transport it over, and then you have to clear customs on that side, and usually it ends up costing you a lot more money, time and effort than it's worth. So that's.
Thank you, David. So we want to be respectful of your time. We said we'd close by 2, so I think we'll leave it at that. We are going to circulate to each of you a full list of the action items that came up today that Georgette suggested. We're going to circulate the video and notes from today's session. Please share it with other influencers. We will be working on follow-up meetings, as was suggested, with all the resettlement agencies, especially with JFS at the lead as our primary partner on this. And thank you so much for coming. Jim, you're going to say a final word?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to just close with a couple of quick ideas. I think if Paul Ecke Sr. had heard my words at the beginning of this meeting today, he would have interrupted me and reminded me that his business was built with immigrant labor, and they highly respected that immigrant labor. We would be remiss if we didn't recognize the fact that in our community, we are a solid immigrant community, one of the most beautiful immigrant communities in America. And we talked a lot about international crises today and how we can help others. But the most important thing we can do in confronting this crisis is to ask ourselves what kind of Americans that we want to be, what kind of communities that we want to live in. I'm so proud of each and every one of you to have spent a couple of hours this afternoon talking about this. We will do more to advance this problem if you leave here today and intentionally go out, meet in a small group, have a cup of coffee with 6 people, and talk about what you learned, share your knowledge, and bring this community together so we can be better Americans. Thank you so much for coming today.